Hey everyone, this is Mason Hutchison, and you're listening to Herb Rally, your daily herbal podcast. Today's episode is yet another edition of the Herbalist Hour, and in this one I'm joined by my good friend, Seven Song. I had a wonderful time catching up with Seven Song at the 2023 Great Lakes Herb Faire, which is where this episode was recorded. We covered all sorts of topics such as autumn olive, Berberis versus Mahonia, what he appreciates about the herbal community and what he doesn't, how to pursue a career in herbalism, his epic trip to Alaska, his herbal origin story, which is pretty incredible and involves some mice, and a whole lot more. And speaking of his trip to Alaska, if you watch the video version of this interview on YouTube, on our YouTube channel, at the very end, we kind of show some pictures from his adventures. So if you want to see some visuals to some of what he's talking about, check out this interview on our YouTube channel, which you could find at youtube.com/c/herbrally, or simply search for Herb Rally in the search bar. If you're not already subscribed, please give us a subscribe. We've been coming out with new videos each and every day. Oh, this interview also has a couple of guest questions from our friends Christa Sinadinos, Betsy Miller, and Jim McDonald. Some serious, some silly. So a huge thanks to Seven Song for joining me, taking an hour to spend with us during the event. Thanks to y'all for listening. Before we get into the show, I want to say huge thanks to our presenting sponsor for the Herbalist Hour, and that is Oshala Farm. You can learn more about them at oshalafarm.com. But if you're looking to get some U.S. domestically grown organic herbs grown with love in Southern Oregon, check out Oshala Farm. They grow over 80 different medicinal plants, along with they have other herbal products as well. So one more time, that's oshalafarm.com. And thanks to them for being our presenting sponsor for the show. Amanda and I are about to head up to Marquette, Michigan here in a few. We're going to be interviewing a few people for the Herbalist Hour, so stay tuned for those adventures, and hope you enjoyed today's interview. You're going to love this interview. It's awesome. It's been getting a ton of love on our YouTube video already. Lots of comments. All right. Talk to you very soon. Bye.
Welcome to the Herbalist Hour. This is where community gather, merging the power of people and flowers, the sweet and the bitter to the salty, the sour. Umami, it's time for the Herbalist Hour.
Well, welcome back to the Herbalist Hour. Today I'm joined by Seven Song here at the Great Lakes Herb Faire. What an awesome, amazing event. Actually, last time I was here, you were teaching here as well. But if you don't know Seven Song, you probably don't. I'll read you a little bio. So this was his official bio for the Great Lakes Herb Faire. At the age of 12 years old, Seven Song was found in an abandoned mall. No one knows how he got there. In the mall, he was raised by a family of kindly lab-escaped mice who took him in as their own. They taught him how to use the plants that grew in the old planters and in the cracks of the overgrown, disused parking lot. He was eventually found by a small cadre of vagabond herbalists who started living in the mall. They took him out to the fields and showed him the medicinal plants and trees. In return, Seven Song taught them what he learned from the mice, which was initially difficult as he only spoke squeak. Then he demolished them all to put it in an exclusive high-rise. He hitchhiked to Greenland, where he lived in an ice cave and only ate the foods he could forage in the nearby fjords. Hopefully I get that word correctly. Fortunately, 2 caves over lived a pair of herbalists who continued to teach him the uses of medicinal plants. Around 1994, the ice cave was cleaved by climate change, and he slowly drifted to the U.S., where he continued to pursue his interest in plant medicine.
All true.
What a story. Wow, you had quite the journey to get here. Now you're an esteemed elder at the Great Lakes Herb Faire.
Still looking for the people who abandoned me at the mall.
But seriously, what was a young Seven Song like in your, say, childhood, minus the mice?
There's a lot of ways. I mean, irascible might be one word. A lot of marks on his report card saying needs improvement.
Oh, wow.
So as far as like herbal medicine, the thing that I've always been is a categorizer. And so, so my first like science that I really liked was astronomy. And I was talked out of astronomy and by somebody, but also it's like astronomy is it's very mathematical. I'm not very mathematical, so astronomy it's beautiful looking up in the sky, but actually understanding it. And then I went from there to herpetology. So I'm just like 8 or 9 years old at this point, maybe 10. And so herpetology is the study of amphibians and reptiles. And so I had flashcards. But I think the main point where I'm really trying to say is I just like, so what is that constellation? What is this reptile? Plants came much later in my life. So, but I was definitely that kid who had lots of questions, which the teachers didn't always like. But so I grew up in the suburbs of Long Island. And so not a lot of woods at all. And so where I hung out was the barrier between houses and highways, right? So there's a barrier woods. So people, now sometimes there's walls. Where I grew up, there were woods. And so I'd go in those woods, look and catch salamanders, find some turtles occasionally. They're probably all dead. I mean, probably been dead a long time from that area. I mean, really, you can't see it, but it's maybe 40 feet wide.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, you consider yourself a categorizer, and I've known you for several years now, and you always post on social media various animals or insects that you find. What kind of drew you to the plants? Why did you decide to become, say, an expert in that? And you do know, like, your salamanders and whatnot. Do you actually categorize them by family, genus, and species as well? Are you good at that, or?
That's a great question. No, I'm terrible at that. Like,
okay.
so there are some forms of mammals, like Corvidae or like the weasel family, Muscidae, that I can. But the thing about plants is like there's 250,000 species. There's not even close to that like in animals. So most people, like an expert will definitely classify them. But in order to like identify plants, like if you saw an ermine and a ferret and a weasel, you could probably tell them apart. But if you saw like 3 kinds of poison ivy next to each other, it would be more difficult. So I guess the point is often you have to know like more background, or that's what the botanist is saying. But I like to think of myself as a naturalist. So I like to think of myself more as interested in wide variety or just things that grow around me or live around me. But I started studying plants much more in depth when I went to the Platonic Academy of Herbal Studies in Santa Cruz, California in 1981. And a young Christopher Hobbs, a very young Seven Song, and a young Christopher Hobbs, I took botany classes with him. Actually, me and a friend would bake goods in exchange for money to go to those classes. And so I had an interest. So I gathered plants before that, but Chris definitely was the one that made me start thinking, like, how do I really identify stuff and starting to key stuff out. Yeah.
So when I think of Christopher Hobbs, I think of mushrooms. Do you ever dabble in fungi? I don't think I've ever seen you really talk about it much.
Dabble is about the right word.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm much more of a botany person than a fungi person. But like lots of herbalists, I can identify like 7 or maybe 15 different edible, medicinal, and poisonous mushrooms. On this trip for the first time, I gathered an Amanita muscaria, and I forgot the variety, but I made sure to get that, and I tinctured it, mostly on Jim McDonald's recommendation. Because I want to use it for sciatica. So it's an external use.
Okay.
He and other people have been using Amanita mushrooms externally, which means that it doesn't have any of the mind-altering properties. So I tinctured some.
Wow.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
I've never heard of the external use of Amanita muscaria. All right. So that was called the Platonic School?
Yeah. So
I've never heard of that school.
Yeah. So the school existed.
Okay.
Not just in my mind.
It wasn't just the Amanita?
No Amanitas for me at that point in my life.
Okay.
So it was run by a guy named Paul Lee who just died this year. So you would have to, it's not a lot of herbalists. I don't know anybody. Like Michael Tierra taught alongside of it. Christopher Hobbs taught the botany. It only lasted a few years. Frankly, it really didn't have a lot to do with herbal medicine. So Platonic, because Paul Lee was like Timothy Leary and those other guys, was like a Harvard professor dropout who then like kind of went to the dark side or the light side or the plant side. And so he was maybe a Homeric scholar or like a Greek scholar. That's what he taught at Harvard. Sure. So that's why it's called Platonic, because it has to do with Platonic teaching rather than Platonic relationships.
Okay.
Which is what everybody thinks.
Of course.
Yeah, I mean, he must have knew that when he named it.
Sure.
But yeah, if you look it up, you can find little bits about the Platonic Academy of Herbal Studies.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what was, so you went to the, keep that in. You went to the Platonic school.
Yeah.
What
Platonic
was
Academy.
some of the next mentors you had or schools you went to?
Yeah, so actually my memory works for this. Okay. I think as long as people interview me,
Yeah, sure.
I'll
It's
remember
coming
these
back.
things, right? Which is good. Otherwise, like things have like just disappeared.
Yeah.
So after the botanic school, I was a hitchhiker in those days. Like I hitchhiked somewhere else and then somewhere else after that. And then in 1982, maybe somewhere around there, I went to the Oregon Country Fair. And at the Oregon Country Fair, there was a booth for the California School of Herbal Studies. And I just went there and I was like, wow, this looks beautiful and amazing. And mostly because the woman who was personing the booth was knitting a tam. Like a tam was like these woolen hats, and it had earth tones. Like normally they're like just bright colors. And I was like, wow, somebody finally like making a hat with earth tones, which obviously I haven't even reached that point yet.
Too colorful?
Yeah, I know. Maybe someday I'll graduate to brown. Yeah. And then I looked through their book, and then that had like all their field trips, and then I noticed that they had a work study where you worked half and then studied, and so went to most of the classes. Actually, not their field trips, not most of them. So after that, I hitchhiked so I did that, and then I hitchhiked to the California School of Herbal Studies in '83. Which is how come I know Rosemary. So Rosemary Gladstar is here and just talked about me. The reason I know Rosemary Gladstar is because she was running the school for many years, and when I went there, I met her. So then I helped in the garden and did a work study. And so that's number 2. You ready for number 3?
I am, but I got to know. Okay, so first of all, was Rosemary at the Oregon Country Fair?
She was not.
Okay, and was Howie Brownstein in the Columbine School at that Oregon Country Fair yet?
I didn't meet him there.
Okay.
I met Howie later.
Okay.
I think Howie's like one of the first people to start an herb school. I don't think he gets credit for that.
Wow.
I think the California school might have been started, but like for one individual doing a school, Howie's been doing it like almost the longest.
And I know I actually used to work the Columbine's booth at the Oregon Country
you
Fair.
did?
Yeah. I would roll herbal cigarettes all day, every day. So, and I just think of those two as synonymous. So it's interesting to hear that the California school was there as well.
Yeah, and they had a booth. Like I feel like their booth was separate. Like all the Rolly people in one area. Right. But then my memory starts to get very vague.
Sure.
But I don't remember, because basically even then I had an interest.
Yeah.
But I don't remember going. Yeah, I don't remember seeing. But I don't remember like almost anything.
Sure.
I do remember they had homemade root beer.
Okay.
I love root beer soda, and I like it homemade.
Heck yeah. Right on. Well, all right. Let's go to the next step then.
So then I had 10 years. Then I did extensive traveling. I hitchhiked in Europe for about a year, went to India. I did like that whole like hippie trail. And then I came back and I decided that I wanted to get more in depth with herbal medicine. And so then I hitchhiked him. Actually, that's not true. Me and a friend drove to Michael Moore, who was in Albuquerque, New Mexico. And I asked him if I could teach botany. So I basically, what I've done is I've tried to learn a skill. Like my first skill was just picking up rocks. And then by Michael Moore, I had been studying botany for enough years where I then taught botany for him. So I did another work exchange because I tried to live without working all the time. I don't know a better way of saying that, so that I can travel more. And so he said yes. So he remembered me. So when I met Michael Moore, he's like, so I don't know if anybody here, if you're watching this, knew Michael Moore, but he had a grumpy or curmudgeonly persona. And he was pretty good with that most of the time. I spent time with him. So he's like, you're the guy that wore the skirt, because I used to wear skirts, kind of Indian skirts or wraps. Yeah. And he said that, and then we compared drug notes. And then he said, yeah, you can teach.
Wow. Okay.
And so then I taught, and then I did that for 2 years. So out of all the herbalists, Michael Moore is by far the most influential for me.
Yeah.
So I went to his school in 94 and 95. I taught botany my first year teaching botany. It was so there's like peers, and so I'm teaching botany and I'd get up like the hour or two, like I just thought like my heart would just like bust out because I was nervous.
Yeah, sure.
But I got better with time. So I really appreciate that. Like Michael Moore gave me first he gave me some cred. So Michael Moore is less well known now, but then he was well known. So like if I said, I studied and taught for Michael Moore, it opened some doors for me. But also, it gave me. I went to his school. I listened to him for 2 years. So Michael Moore swears a lot, and I love swearing. And he's also irreverent, and I am irreverent. And so it was really nice because often herbal medicine has a nicey nice aspect to it. And it's not how I really work. I'm kind of a New Yorker with like a bad attitude. And so it was really nice. And also, and more importantly, Michael Moore is very scientific. His lens is a very scientific lens into herbal medicine, as mine has always been. Maybe not always, but most of my life. And so, so as much as his teaching, knowing that these other herbalists had like these qualities of a lot of questioning, potty mouthness, and science, it was important.
You were two peas in a pod, and I could totally see how Christa Sinadinos was also
Yes.
a big fan of Michael Moore, because she also likes to say the F-bomb and whatnot.
Yeah, way more. Yeah.
So was Michael Moore personally did he have an expertise in botany?
No, Michael Moore, I never know exactly. So, we go on field trips, and I think, Michael Moore has a great memory. And so he would point out plants, and he would sometimes know what they were by their botanical characteristics. Yeah. But I'm not actually sure he keyed out plants. I think maybe he did it once, and then he would memorize. Like someone like myself will key plants out, the same plants over and over again. So, but he did know his plants. Like when he said, like, this plant is Asclepias asperula, it was pretty much always right, because I would key it out afterwards because I'm gathering it. I want to be sure. But from anybody, unless they were really a trained botanist. No, he was good at, so I would say yes. I don't know if he called himself a botanist. Well, actually, Michael Moore put down botanists all the time, and I was the school botanist. Yeah. So
putting you down.
So he would say stuff, because botanists change the names of plants on a regular. And if he was alive now, it would be so much, because DNA has changed it even more. Yeah. But he always put down botanists, and so he would look at me.
Isn't chrysanthemum leucanthemum no longer?
Chrysanthemum, now it's Leucanthemum vulgare.
What a shame.
Oh, that's a terrible. So out of most of them, chrysanthemum leucanthemum, chris means gold, anthema means flower, leuc means white. Anthema means flower, so chrysanthemum leucanthemum means gold flower, white flower, which is true because they're yellow and white. Yeah. But now they changed it. Leucanthemum now means white flower, and vulgare means common. Okay. Yeah.
We could keep going, but I am kind of curious. How important do you think it is for herbalists to know botany, or if at all?
So first we have to use the different terms. So botany is the study of plants. And so I actually just know a very small segment of botany. Like if I was a real like I don't understand plant physiology that well, or I don't understand plant diseases that well, or how plants grow in specific ways, or so botany is an extremely large. So anybody who's a botanist will have specialty in botany. Gotcha. My specialty would be taxonomy, which is the naming of plants. So I know plants because I can identify them, because I know their taxonomy and botanical characteristics.
Good differentiation.
Yeah. So I do say I'm a botanist, because that's a shorthand for lots of different kinds of botany. So me and Howie Bronstein are the two herbalists that force our students to learn how to identify plants in a technical manner. Yeah. And almost all the students dislike it. It's a lot of work. It's vigorous. It's very deductive. Certain kinds of brains work for it better. I have a deductive brain, so it works good for me. Like if it's this or this, and it's not this. If it's this and this, and it's this. But most of the students, like Greg, who is here, actually took botany in my school and then went with it. Yeah. But I would say most of them just resell their Gleason and Cronquist, which is the technical book we use. But is it important? I would say if you're gathering plants and you're naming them. So if you have like a cultural milieu, if you've been grown up in a tradition, if you live in an area, so you grew up around Portland, Oregon, and then somebody who knows the plants well taught you all those plants, and you stay there, you don't really need to know. Like you have learned the plants from an expert, whether they're science trained or traditional trained. Yeah. But if then you travel, let's say you go to Wisconsin, and then you start picking plants, then it's important to know the differences from them. And one thing I think that gets overlooked is that there are rare plants. Like here there will not be. This is a very used thing. There's a lot of non-natives, and even the native plants are the common native plants. But in many areas, and herbalists often wildcraft in places that have been less disturbed, there are just rare plants that look like not rare plants. Yeah. So the differentiation is going to be technical. And so it might have to do with how the bract is based on it. So I would say, if you're going wildcrafting outside of your scope of knowledge, then actually knowing how to identify plants is important for the plant's sake. And then, of course, if you're putting it in people's bodies, which is kind of what herbalists do, that's also important.
I can see that.
Yeah, there's a lot of safe plants. But, you're talking to somebody who spent this. So, like, my nemesis is the botany app, right? Because that's going to displace me eventually. Like, right now, they're not great. So I have a few more years before those botany apps where you take a picture and it shows that they're going to get really excellent because they're AI, right?
Just a quick break from the show to thank our presenting sponsor, Oshala Farm. Oshala Farm is a beautiful and vibrant certified organic herb farm based in Southern Oregon, where they grow and sell over 80 different plant species. The founders, Elise and Jeff Higley, have been longtime friends, so I highly trust their growing methods and ethics. You'll love the potency and vibrancy of all the herbs they have to offer. To learn more and purchase their herbs and other organic goods, head to oshalafarm.com. So thanks once again to Oshala Farm for sponsoring the Herbalist Hour. Now back to the show. Enjoy.
Yes.
I have to ask, to follow up, I mean, I know we're kind of kidding about the AI stuff, but maybe not as well. Are you actually worried, like, say, an herbalist career path might be in danger because of AI and everything? Or
I think we're so low on the hierarchical, like, pay scale of anybody that nobody's going to AI us anytime soon because it's not worth it. Like, it's just cheaper to pay herbalists to do their job. So, like, I think that AI is not going to do it. But actually, probably not for a long time. For the same reason, so it'd actually probably be easier for a medical person to have an AI diagnosis because they tend to ask standardized questions. Right. Herbalists don't tend to ask standardized questions. But in the future, some of it will be taken over. I mean, it only makes sense that, you put in information over the course of years, it's going to just improve. Yeah. And so, but it will not be my generation.
Fair enough. Yeah. Well, you were bringing up Portland to Wisconsin, and
should have said Eugene.
Well, no, you're absolutely right, though. So I moved from Eugene, Oregon, to Wisconsin, and I had the fortune of taking the Columbine School of Botanical Studies, where I did want to say, at first, learning the botany it didn't come natural to me.
Right.
I will say I'm super grateful that I did it, because eventually I did kind of pick it up, and now you see the wall of green, and now I can actually differentiate between plants, see the botanical characteristics, and now that I live in Wisconsin, although I don't know a lot of the plants, I do see certain characteristics, and I'm like, at least I could say it's in that plant family. So I'm super grateful to Howie and Steven and the Columbine School for that.
It's amazing. Like I travel fairly frequently. And if you stay actually in the northern hemisphere of the world, the families are pretty consistent. And if the plant's in flower, you're like, oh, that's a Rosaceae, that's a Berberidaceae. And so it really allows identification. So that means if I go to a new place, I need a flora. A flora is a book that has all the plants of an area. But I don't have to start from the beginning, because often I look at a flower, I'm like, oh, that's going to be, actually the Phrymaceaes are very difficult to tell. There's a Phryma over here. Yeah.
Well, would you be open to talking about one of the plants? Maybe we could you could teach us a little bit about poison ivy, since we were talking about before the interview. Or
well, this is Elaeagnus umbellata.
Okay.
And this is a very weedy shrub, and it's right up over here. I'm going to grab some fruits and bring them back. One thing that's pretty interesting is the plant is lepidote, which means it has scales. Like Lepidoptera is the study of butterflies, because butterfly wings have scales and moth wings have scales. And this is like green on one side. And then it's lepidote, or a silvery scaly in the bottom, which is just pretty. But it's crazily invasive and common. But it has the fruits are also lepidote. This is going to be harder to see. They have silver sparkles on them. It's basically scales. But if you like sour with a little bit of sweet, these are delicious. Have you tried them?
I haven't.
Yeah, try them.
I saw some kid eating these yesterday, though.
Yeah. So this is a non-native plant. I mean, I'm a non-native person. My family's been here 3 generations.
That is really good.
They're delicious.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah. We're not far from me in New Jersey. There's a whole, I'm getting the common name, Elaeagnus, autumn olive. It's called autumn olive.
I've heard of that.
Yeah. There's a whole, they make autumn olive. It's like the garlic thing in Gilroy, California. They make autumn olive ice cream. I don't know what they do.
Right.
So I would just say, so that's more of a foraging thing. I've never used this for medicine. No. I've never used, most of the plants right in here are what's called Virginia creeper. And I've never seen that used for medicine. Actually, when I asked Michael Moore if it's used for medicine, he harumphed me. Yeah. There's not too many plants I use. This is garlic mustard, another very invasive weed, but it's just sticks right now. There's some goldenrod, which I do use for medicine. There's some small yellow flowers you probably can't see.
So when you're doing your plant walk later on, it's not going to be here.
It's not going to be right here. No, we're going to start at bone set, and then maybe go to skull cap, and then maybe like some of the plants that people will know.
Yeah.
But then we'll do a couple of obscure, and then if people, I mean, my guess, a lot of people know the autumn olive. But we'll probably eat some of those. There's a tulip, tree tulip, poplar. So it's in the magnolia family. It's also not used that often for medicine.
Right on.
Yeah.
Well, let's shift gears a little bit.
Sure.
You've been in this herbal world for a long time. Let's hit you with the hard-hitting questions here. What do you appreciate about the herbal community, and what would you like to see some improvement on?
So I think about this pretty regularly. You know, I mean, I've run an herb school.
Yeah.
So I've run an herb school since 1992. And so I think like maybe that's just a plug for my school.
Sure.
Northeast School of Botanical Medicine.
7song.com.
Yes.
That's a number 7.
Exactly. I'm getting closer to retiring, so not too many more years. So really, but it's less about that. So number one, so a common question is, why herbal medicine? And the answer is, I'm not really sure. Like, why do we do anything is a question, like, unless like your parents were a baker and you were a baker,
right.
Like then it's like, why to do it? But I think the main reason is actually the community. So I need supportive community. I never would have said this in my early 20s or whatever until some years ago when I thought about like, what do I really like about it? And I think the herbal community tends to be on the kind side, but the quirky side, often thoughtful. And so when I go to something like this, like I get overwhelmed with a lot of people around me, but it's still like good people to feel overwhelmed around. Like I could probably just say that because I've been in other situations where it just feels tight and talking to people feels very struggling. Yeah. And I would say the herbal community, I mean, you would know this well because, you interview people and just meet a lot of people. Yeah. But I think the thing that I like most about the herbal community is the community. And I've just been, it's just been a lot of years. And so, I mean, coming from like a street urchin-y, meaning a brat background, and, having this group of people that help support me intellectually, but also not try to get confined into like, into a square person in a square hole. It doesn't make sense, whatever a square hole is called. So that's I think what I appreciate the most. And here's the crazy shit. So I'm a high school dropout. Like I left high school at 15. I had to go to a special school because I dropped out too early. I'm terrible at school. Like I don't test well. I'm not so good with authority figures. And so I left school real early and I didn't do anything good. Like sometimes I'll meet, like there's somebody here I met who dropped out of high school and then like did great stuff. I didn't. I just dropped out and didn't do anything particularly good at all. And so I think the surprise to many people is that I became a teacher who runs their own school. But that actually makes sense because I like learning. I just don't do good in a confined environment. Yeah. So, and in the United States in particular, the herb schools really vary a lot, like as far as like who your teacher is, because freedom of speech. So I am not moving into a patriotic moment here, but freedom of speech is something that is allowed to be done here. You can say almost everything that's not inciting riots. Yeah. And even there, if you watch the news, that gets tricky. And so that means that pretty much anybody can, as long as you pay your taxes, you can run any kind of school you want. And so herbalists have done that. There's all different kinds of schools that have come and gone over the years. And often it's just somebody says, I like this and I want to teach this. Yeah. So I like that kind of diversity. Ready for the second part?
Sure am.
So then the second part, this is going to sound elitist and it's tricky. And really it's kind of easy to say, but hard to say. I'll just say it. So my worry, and it has to do with what I just said, is that a lot of people who practice herbal medicine don't understand how important modern medicine is to keep people alive. So I work so this is a kind of a clinical elitism that I would say that I harbor. I work with a lot of very sick people, and herbal medicine is important to them, but their drugs are more important to them. Then maybe surgery or radiation might be more important to them. So this is not trying to give the slip to our horrible medical system that charges a lot and depersonalizes people. Like the United States has a horrible medical system. I mean, as far as like advanced medicine, it's here. Yeah. But as far as like feeling like you're a real human being and getting proper care, that can be very difficult. And proper affordable care can be nearly impossible. But that's not what I'm talking about. So, so at a certain level, if somebody has like a mild case of COVID, you can definitely give herb because they're going to get better. Yeah. But as soon as they have some more debilitating, like a form of rheumatoid arthritis that's crippling them, and now their fingers it's hard for them to use. Some of the new biologic drugs are going to be much more effective, and then you can give herbs for everything else or whatever else is necessary. So, my concern, and the thing that I don't like, is sometimes I feel like we don't take people's health seriously enough and understand that there are multiple ways. And it's not just herbs, it's not just drugs, right? There's massage therapy, there's mental health counseling, and there's many ways. And that's another place where the system fails us, right? Because like I work in a free clinic that has multiple modalities, and that's often what's necessary, right? There's the person's mind, that maybe talking to somebody is helpful. The person's body, maybe some physical change, whether it's acupuncture or massage or chiropractic. And then there's internal medicines. But again, I think the one thing that I'm going to make a comparison. Sure. So the one thing everybody should teach, if they teach about plants, is the first thing you teach is all the plants that will kill you. Right, because there's hardly any. Right. It's like unless a tree falls on you, most plants around here are not deadly poisonous. They might make you sick, they might make you vomit, they might give you diarrhea, but you will recover. But there are plants that you will not recover from. So really, before you pick anything, like you have to know that certain mushrooms will kill you, and then certain plants will kill you, and the roots are the worst part if they are. Well, the same thing is true in healthcare. So I think that for some people, like you have to know, like this person's shakiness and not being able to hold a physical object and dropping it could be some kind of nervous system disorder that should be sought. Medical care, if possible, should be sought. And so I think that that's one problem. And then the other thing is we don't have a collection of data of clinical herbalism. So all the stuff that I'm saying about what I don't care for is actually about practicing clinical herbalism, meaning working with people that you don't really know, right? Because working with family, they can be very forgiving for stuff. Working with people who you don't know are less forgiving for things because they don't know you. And so I don't really know what to do about that, but I think there's some classes here actually focused on clinical. It's really just critical thinking. Yeah. Because the goal of seeing a sick person, an unhealthy person, and we all have unhealth. I mean, like, unless you're super young, everybody, like, this is like 10 trillion cells trying to get along. Right. That's all of our bodies. Yeah. And so some cells are just not going to function. It might be your heart, it might be your liver, it might be your kidneys, it might be your skin, it might be your brain, whatever it is. And over the course of time, you're going to, the body breaks down. Yeah. And so I think understanding like some of the cardinal signs of like this needs to be seen medically, and then how to network the person into it, because sometimes there's no option. Like you have to figure out, again, I work in a clinic, so we can at least figure out how to get somebody to get some labs at a reasonable price. We don't have labs at the clinic. I think I was going to say something else, but I lost my train of thought. That's
fair. Maybe it'll come back. Okay. But so you work closely with MDs at the free clinic.
I do.
Yeah. Have you noticed over the course of time of working with them, especially if you've worked with the same doctors, have they come to respect what you do as an herbalist?
They've come to respect my snarkiness. I'm not sure they respect that. I would say, all right, so again, this is kind of elitist talk. So sure. A lot of herbalists are taught in a very traditional manner. I'm not. I'm taught in a science manner of herbal medicine. But that means is I speak the same language as doctors. Totally. And so I've been, I'm one of the founders of a free clinic. It's not my clinic, but I am one of the people who helped start it 16 years ago. It's many people part of the clinic. Yeah. So when I talk to the doctors, I speak the language they speak, right. And I understand the language they tell me, and it makes them feel it makes them feel like I'm not too far out.
Right.
So I'm not sure like they really like herbal medicine. I mean, what they do is they'll send me people if they want drugs that they think the drugs are bad for them. Let's say the person has taken antibiotics for something. They think the antibiotic they shouldn't. They might send them to me, even though I can't, because I can't prescribe antibiotics. I'm not a medical doctor. So I would say, the doctors have come and go. Almost all the doctors that have worked in the free clinic are retired doctors. So they are with us for a few years before they retire even more. Yeah. But I would say I have good relationships with them. But I would think that if I was a more spiritual herbalist, and if they were more spiritual, I don't know the doctor's spiritualities. But no, in general, I'm pretty well received in the medical community. Also, I'm cautious. Right, which they want to hear.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, I would like to get to some guest questions.
Okay. All right, here we go.
Here's a Christa Sinadinos question. Thanks for submitting these. Christa asks, what herb has he used for decades in practice that has been significantly less effective than it's acclaimed to be, or vice versa? What's been more effective than he's anticipated?
Oh. On the more effective side, chaparral, Larea tridentata, not internally but externally. So a lot of my work is first aid work, and we see a lot of infections. And I would say over the course of time, I rely more and more on chaparral for many kinds of pussy infections.
Okay.
So maybe that's one that's grown more. I probably, in some ways though, I learned internal uses, and I don't use it internally anymore because of potential damage. There's a lot of herbs that we'll go with cleavers. So cleavers, or Gallium aperine, is supposed to help clear the lymph. I'm not sure the herb doesn't work, but this is a tricky question. So like clearing your lymph is a weird concept because the lymph glands swell from infection generally. And so if you clear the lymph, you're just pushing infection. Like you're not helping the body. It's like, I don't know, it's like trying to clear the thing that's trying to do a positive thing. So I would think like cleavers, while I'm starting to use it again, for a long time I just like didn't use it because I didn't really understand like what's the purpose of trying to help swollen lymph glands go down unless the lymph glands are infected. And then that might be helpful, but then you're not trying to clear them, you're trying to kill infection. So I'll go with cleavers on trying to figure out what that really does, and chaparral as something. But really, all right, but the plant that I've used more and more and more is plants that contain high amounts of berberine. So I use a lot of Japanese barberry. I used to use Oregon grapefruit, but that doesn't grow near me, and it's a native plant, so just let it be, even though it's very common. But Japanese barberry is extremely weedy in parts of New York. I mean,
really?
Oh yeah, if you go to Richard Mandelbaum, who runs the Arborvitae School, like his yard is just massive Japanese barberry. And so that's what I've been using, and using it more, and using it mostly for internal and external infections, both bacterial and viral. Actually, so even more than chaparral, that's the plant that kind of holds a center stage for me and has for years.
Is the Japanese barberry a Mahonia?
It's a Berberis.
Oh, Berberis.
And most Mahonias are now put in the genus Berberis, depending
my
which
gosh.
book you use. Sorry.
No, well, because when I learned it, Howie taught it as Berberis nervosa or Berberis alcifolium.
That'd be right.
And I want to say during that time it switched to Mahonia, but it was like, fuck it, I want to keep Berberis. So
Yeah. No, actually, Berberis is the more current one.
Okay.
But this is the Michael Moore thing. This is why
Yeah.
Michael Moore didn't like botanies. He's like, they're just always screwing with us. And it's maybe true, but I'm not like that's another level. Like I don't name plants.
Yeah, fair enough.
Yeah. All right.
All right, let's go to the next one. What treatment strategies and herbs does he most commonly use and find effective for treating insulin resistance?
So there's two herbs that I use regularly for type 2 diabetes with insulin resistance. I mean, like, so this could be interpreted as like metabolic X syndrome or syndrome X. So I'm not going with that. I'm just saying for people who have type 2 diabetes and usually not insulin dependent yet, first they need medicines if they have high numbers.
Yeah.
So I want to there's no way I want to say in particular, a lot of people are alive because of diabetes medicines. I mean, why more diabetes is on the rise is a whole other question. Food, environment, stress. But there are two plants that I mix together that will often bring the numbers down. So if you know your A1Cs, let's say they had like an A1C of 12, they take the metformin and maybe what other medicines, and now it's like 9.2. And then sometimes if you give them herbs, you can get it down to like 8. And the two herbs are Japanese barberry, because berberine brings it down, or any berberine-containing herb, and cinnamon. And often in vegetable glycerin, because vegetable glycerin does not raise blood sugar.
Oh, I wouldn't have thought that.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, because it's more related to alcohol than sugar.
Oh.
And I'm not really sure. I mean, my chemistry is weak in this, but no, the science is clear. Also, I give them these things, and then we measure later. So that's actually my favorite treatment. But I would, at this point, I think there's like 50 or 60 common plants that help insulin resistance, and these are just the 2 that I've stayed with because I gather them, and cinnamon is extremely easy to purchase. So yeah.
Ubiquitous. I mean, it tastes good.
Yeah,
so
it tastes good. Well, initially, if you have to take it a long time, then the flavor becomes scrunchy.
For sure.
Yeah.
So last one from Christa. Thanks again, Christa, for submitting all these amazing questions. So how does Yohimbe compare to the effectiveness of Viagra?
Why are you staring at me so intently?
As I slowly turn.
It's like, is there some personal thing going on here? So that's pretty straightforward. Viagra actually works, and Yohimbe is a central nervous system stimulant. So out of all the people I've known that have tried Yohimbe, very few of them have had positive erectile function. I've tried Yohimbe 2 or 3 times, but I thought it was like from the right companies, and for me, it's like crazy amounts of speed. It is so uncomfortable. I mean, my penis goes inside when I take that stuff, right? It's just like hides from the rest of my spinal nerves. I mean,
Fight or flight.
Yeah, exactly, and totally flight.
Yeah.
No fight going on at all. Yeah, no, and so I have met 1 or 2 people that have said if they take Yohimbe, blood rushes to their penis and they have an erection, but most people find, because it is a central nervous system stimulant, find it very aggravating, where Viagra, so I haven't tried Viagra, but I am pro-Viagra, and there's 3 main drugs for erectile dysfunction, all working on the same principle, but Viagra for many people is helpful. I was frankly, the marketing of it and all that and the money, I'm not so into, but actually, a lot of my practice has been inclusive male healthcare for a lot of my life. I focus having a male body, working with people with various kinds of male bodies, and a common problem has actually been erectile dysfunction. And Viagra, Cialis, Levitra, really for some people work, and sometimes they don't need to keep taking them. So actually, I'm very pro those medicines. Yeah.
Great.
Yeah.
Thanks for the thoughtful questions, Christa. We'll do a couple rapid fire questions from Betsy Miller and Jim McDonald.
Oh no!
So here we go.
It's like a bad team. Getting double teamed by them.
They teamed up on these. Yeah. Can you really call yourself an herbalist if you don't like dark chocolate?
Yes.
Okay.
So the reason they're saying that is this Hershey wrapper in my pocket. So before anybody makes...
Is that milk chocolate?
Yes. So I don't really love Hershey's chocolate, but Betsy went to town, and I actually like milk chocolate better than dark chocolate, which is where this question is coming from, but not really Hershey's. But I'm glad I had a wrapper just for this.
Yeah.
So yes.
Awesome.
I think dark chocolate lovers are elitists. I think that's what I think.
You hear that? All right. If oil has precipitated sediment at the bottom of the bottle,
it's not funny.
Then what is the best way to warm it up to get it back into solution? Oh, that might be a serious one.
Yeah, I just usually strain it.
Okay.
Yeah, this is right. So let's just say that in practice recently with Jim's kava oil, let's pretend I put it under my armpit to warm it up and just go from there.
I'm not going to ask that because we're going to save that for end. It was about Alaska. How much cake is unreasonable to carry in your pocket?
There is no unreasonable amount. So notice this pocket and this pocket are cake pockets. So you can put some in here, though they tend to get crushed. These are terrible. These pockets are terrible for cake. So I tend to have a habit of when I have a chance and there's a lot of food around to stash some on me.
Totes.
And bring some to my... You would think that I just grew up without access to food, but that would be not true. So, but I'm a bit of a food hoarder, especially certain kinds of sweets.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Well, you heard it here first. Thanks, Betsy Miller and Jim McDonald, for the guest questions. Well, I do want to hear about your Alaska trip, but before we get into that, I have a question for you. Can you give advice to the budding herbalist on how to pursue a career in herbalism?
Yeah. So, I run a school, and so here's the truth. It's really hard to make a livelihood in herbalism. So Mason has done it by going on the video end and also having a previous job with a company. I've done it by teaching, but there's very few herbalists. Katie Crabb in Southern Ohio actually makes her livelihood as a clinical herbalist. That's where she makes most of her money. But actually, that's really uncommon. I called her up just to see if that was true, and it is true. And so I think the thing that you really have to, so I mean this. It's just like you got to keep your day job initially, because herbal medicine is not widely paid. People don't pay a lot for it. And here's another reality. People like me make this worse. And the reason for this, so this is kind of snarky and kind of true. So I am an herbalist at a free clinic. All the herbs at the free clinic are free. And if you're there in person, and all the consultations are free no matter where you live, because we could do those online. So in a sense, I devalue herbal medicine, right? Because here I am, like a fairly well-known herbalist, and I work for free. I have my own reasons for that. I want to see herbal medicine be spread, and I want it to be affordable and available to as many people as possible. Yeah. But the problem with that is other people want to make their livelihood as a clinical herbalist, and so by people like myself doing it this way, it makes it look like, everybody should do it for free, but that's not true. My students go to my school for a year and then study other places for a year and practice, and it's hard for them to make livelihoods. Really, teaching is the main way, and products are way down the line. It's very hard to make, it's easy to make products and sell a few, but to actually make an income. Yeah. I only have one student, Abby, with Zizia Botanicals in LA, but she's been doing it for 15 years and has really been pushing it the whole time, and has finally figured out, a way. But it's really, so I'm partly saying like they're the students and I'm proud of them doing this, but it's pretty difficult. So I think the first thing is like if money is a concern, and money is a concern, is where do you think, start to think of where do you think you fit into it? There's not that many. I actually have a handout on my website, which is sevensong.com. That's 69 ways to be an herbalist, but really very few of them are realistic. Yeah. I write an herbal novel. I have all kinds of stuff that I just spent way too much time thinking about. But herbal medicine is a valuable, this is the Chamber of Commerce moment. Herbal medicine is valuable, and it can be affordable if you gather the medicines. You can't expect your patients to gather medicines, right? So I work in a free clinic. The idea of my patients gathering medicine is thoughtless, right? They're sick. They often have 2 or 3 jobs. They might have families. There's no way they're going to learn how to gather the correct plant and make the medicines. But if you make them and you have the time to make them, because it's not free, right? It's only free if you have large amounts of time to do this. All right. So I've known for this kind of realistic but downplaying the avenues of herbal medicine. But I've been running a school a long time. And so I have 5 students teaching here, but they make money, and often they have other jobs to help them. And then sometimes they make the leap and they move into something like teaching or being a clinical herbalist. But what I would say is learn your shit. Yeah. Learn how to be a good herbalist. Go through multiple sources. Of course, I would think make sure you understand your warning signs and understand the real health needs of people from a medical viewpoint as much as you can. And be very clear with transparency about your knowledge and skills. But people love it. It is so wonderful to have this skill where somebody's I've had this rash for a long time and for years, and whenever I try these creams, it just gets worse. And I might not be the one to help, but I'm definitely one of the people that has an opportunity to say, okay, here's some herbs, and try this. And so, one thing that's happened since 1981 is herbal medicine, at least in this culture, right? Because in many cultures, herbal medicine has never swayed or moved away. Right. But in this kind of more, suburban, urban culture, it's become more and more popular, and people are really want to know about herbal medicine. And it is a thrill to be a person, to be able to help people, or at least, all right, so just take another, I know we're getting close here, but one thing that I do as an herbalist, I think in fact, I'd say like one of the things I do most as an herbalist is be a bridge between, is to be a bridge for people to understand what their medical diagnoses are, what the possibilities are. I have a pretty good understanding. I mean, I teach physiology and anatomy, and I have a pretty good understanding of many medications and learn them when I need to learn them. And I have a good understanding of a lot of the pathophysiology, like what goes on in our body for a lot of diseases. And so if somebody has diabetes, for instance, often what they don't understand is, why is sugar in our blood a problem? And when you describe that, it helps people understand it and make, I think, better choices with understanding it, or make whatever choices they want, but knowing that sugar basically causes inflammation in the bloodstream for reasons we don't know. And so for me, my avenue has been to be the bridge between the herbal world and conventional medicine and conventional diagnosis. But I think the thing is, like, everybody has separate talents. Like, I'm good with medical sciences. That's my strong suit. There are other approaches, like there's like TCM, traditional Chinese medicine, but there's actually many approaches, and there's many cultural approaches. But the thing is, like, you have to learn. It's not like going and hang around with somebody for a day or two and learning some Latino herbal practices. Like, if you want to know that, that's going to take years, because it's an in-depth cultural tradition. So I would say learn it and study it, but understand that for most people, it's actually not that easy to make a livelihood, at least initially. And for many people, it stays on the side. Yeah, so sorry to be pessimistic, not sorry to be realistic.
No, I think there's a lot of value there, and I think some people might even rewind it and re-listen to that. And we'll be sure to include the 69 tips to be an herbalist in the podcast show notes, along with the YouTube description. So appreciate that, those words of advice. I know you're kind of on the last leg of an epic trip you just took. So can you tell us about this journey you took, and maybe some stories or lessons that you took along the way?
So I'm so glad to get to do this, because this is like the only time in my life I'm going to be able to do this. So in mid-July, I left to drive to Alaska. So I turned 65 this year, so I'm getting old. I'm now part of Rosemary's Herbal Elders presentation. I made some jump this year to 65. Yeah. And it's also, now I have Medicare. So like most Americans, insurance has always been problematic, and now finally I've reached an age where at least I get some stuff covered. It makes a difference for me. I mean, there's not a side effect. Like, having reasonable insurance for the first time, it means I feel more comfortable traveling in other situations. So some months ago, I was thinking, all right, I'm going to take this year off, not travel, take kind of my 65th birthday. And then I thought, what can I not do any other time? And the answer was go to Alaska. And then I thought, could I drive? And so I did it. My car's not particularly new. It's about 8 years old, not particularly old. And I started buying some stuff I never needed, and decided that I wanted to drive to Alaska. In order to force myself to drive to Alaska, because I knew that I would start getting cold feet, in July, because I love being home. So this is like, I'm not teaching. I could be home in my garden, in my home, at this time of the year. So what I did is I bought a ferry ticket from Bellingham, Washington to Haines, Alaska. And so that ferry ticket cost $1,650. So I am definitely not going to let that money go to waste. So I had to buy it. It had to be a date. So it was July 21st. So I kind of bought a ticket to force myself. So, because it started happening like July 10th. I'm like, July 12th. So finally on July 14th, I left. I also wanted to see the Black Hills of South Dakota, which I've always wanted to see. I only spent 2 days there, but got in a great walk with Linda Blackwell, because she's also a botanist. And then I made it to the ferry, of course, with plenty of time. I waited in line for hours before I needed to. Actually, so here's the story. So while I was waiting in line in Bellingham, Washington for the ferry, this female, pulls up in a motorcycle with a sidecar. And I've always wanted to ride in the side. I did it once. I was hitchhiking in Crete, Greece in the 80s and got a ride in the sidecar. And I've always wanted to do it again. So on the ferry, so I talked to her for just a few minutes. She got a lot of attention for this female being on a motorcycle with a side, like lots of attention. So I was like, I don't need to be there. Anyway, eventually I saw her on the ferry we kind of got friendly, just started talking. She was going to Anchorage, which eventually I was going to. So when I got to Anchorage, I contacted her through Instagram and asked her, will you give me a ride in your sidecar? And she said yes.
Wow.
So I spent 45 minutes going around Anchorage, kind of scary, without a helmet, going around Anchorage in a sidecar with somebody learning how to. So Denali, if you're watching this, thank you. That was amazing. Her name is Denali. Yeah, so I got the ferry. If you ever get a chance, so it's expensive. If you don't have a car, it's way less expensive. And I also set up a tent on the ferry. But the ride up the inner passage to Alaska from Washington is so stunningly beautiful. And at times it's so thick and like the tent will blow because it gets very windy. And so one of the things I never thought, so I started my herb school in 1992. And one of the things I really never thought about was I'll start an herb school. So when I'm getting close to retiring, I'll have students in all these places who will let me stay at their homes. And that's exactly what happened. So I started, I visited a number of students. I taught in 3 different places in Alaska. But so I'm on my way. So the thing is, this is the thing I won't be able to say again. I am on my way home. So I left Alaska August 25th. It's now September 9th. And this was always a plan to come to the Great Lakes Herb Faire. It was kind of to push me to get back home.
Sure.
And now I'm, so on tomorrow evening, on Sunday, I will drive home. It's about 8 hours. One of the things that's changed dramatically is my time schedule or something. Like in the past, I thought that 8 hours seems like a long drive. After this trip, so now, if I write a blog, I'm probably going to call it Mr. Carbon Footprint because I've now driven 9,850 miles. So it will be 10 when I get home, 10,000 miles, and it's just seeing a different environment. My favorite part as far as animals, so I saw lots of plants, which is amazing, but also like the top northeast of British Columbia, there was a stretch of like 300 miles or less where I saw like 5 black bear on the side of the road, one with mom and cubs. I saw quite a few caribou, bison, just a few of the native sheep, which look like goats. And then there's this incredible Layard, is what it's called, Layard Hot Springs in BC. It's like $5 to get in. The hot springs are just like natural hot springs? They kind of built it up a little bit. Beautiful. Also just seeing a lot of my friends reacquainting myself. That's been one of the amazing things about running an herb school. We started off with this question of what do I like? And I have a lot of my close friends are former students and teachers. I would say like you, Mason, and now Amanda, and my community continues to grow through being in herbal medicine. But so Alaska, I kind of reacquainted myself with some of the students I haven't seen in many, many years. I got to see that it seems like everybody has 7 junked cars in everybody's house in Alaska, like in case they ever need whatever, some carburetor or some tiny piece from each one, because things break down. Yeah. When things get down to minus 30, things break down.
I saw your eagle shot too.
Oh, that was amazing.
Yeah,
that was at my friend's house. Yeah, bald-headed eagles. Yeah. So it was great seeing animals. The diversity of plants is kind of low, but still is wonderful. Like aconite, so a form of monkshood, Aconitum delphinium folia, is just like there's just monkshood all over the place. So I'm pretty excited. I'm going home. So the one thing I definitely have done on this trip is put off everything, right?
Totally.
So like everybody who's applying to my school in 2024, next year, I'm like, just send me a reminder in September. So when I get home, that part I'm not looking forward to. But I do look forward to getting nude and sitting in my house, not sleeping in my van. I've loved sleeping in the van, but it'll be nice to have a bed and just stretch out.
Oh, you'll feel like you're in the lap of luxury.
I
at your
will.
House. Totally. We spent a few months on the road in an RV, and we have a pretty small house, and it feels like a mansion now. So.
Yeah. The other thing is, it's really funny going with like comparisons. Is so at Fairbanks where I spent some time. I went from Fairbanks eventually to Edmonton, and so Edmonton is like the most northern main city, and it felt so southern. Like Edmonton compared to Fairbanks, it's like that. All these plants that just don't grow north of there.
Yeah.
So not only will things seem bigger, will distances seem easier, but also everything seems southern.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
Thanks for sharing.
Anybody listening, I recommend that the ferry, most people fly and rent a car, which works great. But of course, having your own car and having all your own stuff, It was also because I just drove a lot.
Yeah, I like how you bought the ticket in order to
Yeah.
force yourself to do it. Now, did you schedule the Great Lakes Herb Faire in order to come back?
I kind of did. So I hate to say this because anybody who organized this will hate me for saying this, but I thought, well, I can always cancel.
But you didn't.
Yeah, no,
You're here.
I think the only time I've ever canceled something is because COVID happened.
Right.
You know, I'm not one of those. But I did think I did want to come home.
Yeah.
And this is like an amazing stopping off point, like seeing a lot of friends,
Totally.
meeting new people.
Yeah.
The sun has just come out, which
Yeah.
is nice.
Yeah, absolutely. Well,
Check out Mason's new amazing tattoo.
is it botanically correct?
So yesterday I went over this, not with my loop because loops don't work for this. A loop is a magnifying glass, but this is a botanically accurate dandelion.
Well, I knew I was going to be seeing you the next day, so I was like, I got to make sure it's botanically correct.
It's true. It's also, so if you don't know much about tattoos, this is what a tattoo should look like when it's healing. Like the colors are beautiful. There's no redness around the edges. I treat tattoo infections. So it also looks like Mason will live for another year. At least.
Okay, all right.
Maybe another
Shout
50 or
out
60.
Anthony Thielen at Anchors Away Tattoo in Kalamazoo, Michigan, for doing this.
Anchorage?
Did I say
Anchors away?
Anchors Away.
Oh, it sounds like Anchorage.
He actually does have a tattoo shop in Alaska too,
Oh, yeah.
coincidentally, but he's a childhood friend of mine. So
Oh, nice.
yeah, we were best friends in 3rd grade. So.
Wow.
But Seven Song, thanks for taking the time to be on the Herbalist Hour. That was a lot of fun.
Yeah, of course, that's a lot. So, I mean, it's been great knowing you, Mason.
Likewise.
So, yeah, I feel good about this.
I look forward to many more years of being your friend.
Yes,
And
as long as that tattoo heals nicely,
exactly.
we should be good. As long as I don't get too much older than 65. All right.
all right, we'll see you in the
Thanks.
next episode. Bye.
And that's going to do it for today's episode. Thanks so much for listening to the Herb Rally podcast. If you'd like to hear more from us here at Herb Rally, we now have a text message community, believe it or not. Basically, it's just updates from us. We send about 1 to 7 texts per week, notifying you about new events, videos, courses, podcasts. You get the idea. It's pretty much like our email newsletter, just in text form. So if you'd like to receive text messages from Herb Rally, just text JOIN, that's JOIN, to the number 541-256-2895. Again, that's JOIN to number 541-256-2895. And to stop receiving text, that's easy too. Just text STOP to the same number. It'll opt you out immediately. Okay, thanks again for listening. Have a great rest of your day.